Manx Radio Podcasts, powered by Shaw.
Well, hello and welcome to this week's Countryside with Kiri Kermode and myself, Simon Clark. Well, diversification, pedigree, livestock, all mixed in with trying to run B&Bs. That's Alan and Sandra Jones, isn't it?
Yeah, they're very busy people on the north of the island, and I had a look around their stock that evening, and they're absolute credit to them. But they work hard to run a lovely B&B too, so a nice cup of tea with them as well.
Yeah, it's a lovely place as well, and it seems to be good attractions for visitors now who are just wanting to get away from the hustle and bustle of town life, a lot of them, aren't they?
That's right, it's so peaceful up there. They get a lot of people walking or cycling, and it's so much to see and do on the north of the island as well, and so I believe it's always the sunny north.
Yeah, well, we'll be starting gossip, Kiri, because I was at Smale as well last week, but I met up with the Isle of Man Farming and Wildlife Advisory Group. They were getting shown around there by the Ayers Warden, Louise Sampson, and I had a chat with them, but I also had a chat while I was there with Jane Powell, who is a writer, writes about farming and wildlife things back in her hometown in Aberystwyth in Wales, and it was her first visit to the Isle of Man, so I had a chat with her. And also Heather Honey. We speak to the beekeepers sometimes, but Ian Buxton, who's a member of the Ellen Vannon Friendly Beekeepers Society, he told me a lot of great information about heather honey, which you never really hear much of before I spoke to him.
And there's so many benefits from honey as well. It'd be such a great thing if they get good results with our local heather honey. There's so much heather on the island, so why not use it?
No. And you were at Cronkyvoddy with the big spuds.
Yes, it was a great turnout at Cronkyvoddy as always, and what a wonderful display of produce and flowers and cakes to be had. It was unbelievable. And the highlight of my evening was the massive pumpkin from Harold Leese. It was 100 kilos.
Really?
Massive. They couldn't put it on the table.
Fair, I'll wheelbarrow to get that one home. All right, let's hear it all in full in this week's Countryside.
Manx Radio's Countryside is brought to you by NFU Mutual.
Well, last weekend I took a skeet down to Smale to meet up with some of the FWAG group, the Isle of Man Farming and Wildlife Advisory Group. There I met up with Jane Powell, who has wrote many articles for her local paper and magazines back in Aberystwyth in Wales. It was her first visit to the island, and I asked Jane, first of all, what attracted her here.
Well, I was invited, actually, by the FWAG group, who had read an article that I wrote and decided to invite me to come and talk a bit more about it.
Now, this is something that you're familiar with, not just talking about it, writing about it back home, isn't it?
I've been doing a bit of writing back home in Wales. I originally got into it for a job I had, which was where we were looking at values. We were looking at what people cared about, what really makes people get out of bed in the morning, what they really put their lives on the line for. Using that approach really to talk to people, especially as we did some work with farmers in Wales. We've made a short video talking to farmers about what they really care about, what matters to them, what's really important.
Do you get mixed views from back there, whether some are more important in trying to make a lot of money by expanding and some maybe only have little places and want to help the wildlife? Do you get a bit of a mixture, or are they all pretty well up there?
They're a mixture, but actually what came across talking to all of the ones that we spoke to anyway was how much they see themselves as food producers, how much, not in the sense of producing lots of food and making lots of money, but it really was important to them that they're producing something that people need, and that was what their contribution to society was producing food. But they didn't see it just as producing food, they saw it as so many other things as well. So looking after the environment and wildlife was just part of what they did, completely part of what they did. And creating jobs for the local economy was something that they did. And they liked to see themselves at the centre of a thriving world that they were keeping going themselves.
I suppose when you got the invitation from the Isle of Man Farming and Wildlife Advisory Group, then it was perfectly fitted in.
It was really exciting, yes, because I want to come and I want to explore this more deeply, really, and find out a bit more about what farmers are thinking and where it's all going to go. You know, things are changing so fast. We've got Brexit back home, and that's going to affect you as well in the Isle of Man, I think. Yeah. So many things are up for grabs, so many things are up for rediscussion, and people are open actually to thinking again about where their food comes from and who looks after the countryside.
You've been on a farm this morning early in the visit, and we're out here on the Ayers Nature Reserve now. Tell us about your farm visit today.
Well, I went to see, I think it's called Gilka farm, and we saw the fields there where Joe is growing, is practicing a crop rotation, and then growing a lot of wildflowers around the margins and looking after the hedges. It was beautiful, really, really beautiful.
Yeah, they've got the added bonus, I suppose. They've got they're down by the trench, the Len Trench as they call it. So they've got a bit of marshy stuff. They've got a bit of a sort of little small plantation or wood there as well.
Yes, and the trench is causing a bit of a problem because it's drying out their land and they're losing some of their wet habitats. So it's a really interesting question there about water management and flooding. And
it's funny that when for years farmers have been encouraged, come on, get your ditches clean, get it all drained away, and yet this could cause problems years later.
Yes, and in fact back in Wales, in mid Wales, they're busy blocking up some of the drains because that actually, if you block the drains, more of the water gets absorbed by the land, as opposed to running off into the rivers and actually causing flooding downstream. So it's an important part of flooding control to absorb the water actually where it's produced.
Now we're here at the nature reserve here at Rue Point. You've had a walk around here. What's your impressions of this? Anywhere like this back in Aberystwyth?
Yes and no. Yeah, obviously we've got sea and we've got sand dunes and sand. This is a heath that we don't quite have this habitat. I hadn't seen heather growing quite so short or quite so much on the lowlands.
Oh, you haven't seen how windy it is. Of course, you've had Louise Sampson, the Ayres warden, here showing you around, and she's so passionate about this area.
Knows so much. She was very sad actually hearing about all the difficulties that the breeding birds are having. The Arctic terns not rearing young properly and possibly a drop in the fish stock so that they're not able to feed their chicks. So I think it must be very tough watching things. I think she thinks it's climate change, it's extra rainfall, everything's changing, and of course some species lose out, and it must be very hard to see that. When your job is to look after nature and the things that you're looking after are failing for some reason, and then other things are doing really well. So the curlews are doing very well. So I guess it swings and roundabouts, but it's worrying. I think it's
all over the world.
Things are changing. Yeah, things really are changing.
Well, a very fascinating lady to talk to, and very passionate about finding out more about what's happening in the wildlife world and also the farming world. That was Jane Powell from Aberystwyth in Wales, a guest of the FWAG, the Isle of Man Farming and Wildlife Advisory Group. It was a lovely walk down to the trees and the forests down at Smale, or Rue Point as some call it. It's a group of enthusiasts that trying to look after everything. She learnt a lot about what was happening, of course, with Louise Sampson, the Ayres warden, there along, to give her bits and pieces about her knowledge of the area too.
I suppose there'd be rare species and all sorts of new things to see and to point out to local people as well. And it's such a beautiful place, isn't it, the Ayres?
Yeah, and they'd been to Joe Crellin's in the morning, as she said there in the Kilcock, and having a look around. And it's just a good example of a farm, isn't it? Because it's got lots of different arable land. It's got the equestrian side there with diversification. It's got the little forest and woodland there, the wetlands down near the Len Trench. It's got everything that sort of excites them people from that area of life, really.
Well, that's it. Some of these species only live with certain other species as well. So to have that diversity within one farm, I bet you find all sorts of interesting facts.
Yeah, it was interesting her mentioning as well about with the way things have gone. It's always had the meadows and things. Most farms, I remember, of course, for years they encouraged farmers to put ditches in and drain them, and now they're struggling for wetland areas, which seems...
That's it. The modern way of farming doesn't always suit some of these rare old-fashioned species. And where we are down at Langness there's grasshoppers, and on the coast of Santon Gorge you see all sorts of rare things down there. It's absolutely fascinating for people of the FWAG group.
Yeah. Talking about rare things, some rare old characters at the Cronkyvoddy fair, wasn't there?
Yeah,
I mean that in a nice way, of course.
Absolutely. No, the Cronkyvoddy Produce Show is always a good turnout, and they always hold the big spud competition. And this year, 90 buckets were handed out with seed potatoes, and 87 came back, so it was a really good turnout. So I caught up with some of the organisers, Jim Kane and Gordon Clegg.
Well, it started out that the ploughing match was getting short of funds, so we decided we'd have to do something about it. We arranged to start this produce show and also to restart the sports. Sports used to be happening years ago, and then they died out for a number of years. And then somebody had a bright idea that we buy a marquee. So we done that, and then we started renting it out every year. That come to be 2 marquees in, And this year there's possibly been out more than ever, hasn't it? So we've made a lot of money with that. Since these sports started, we've given well over 50,000 to charity.
And Gordon, you're the chairperson of the society. You must be delighted with the turnout here today.
I'm really pleased with it. We've got 90-footer marquee here now and it's pretty well full, which is a big difference when it first started. And there's good entries in all the confectionery, vegetable classes, pot plants, flower section. Everything has been supported well by everybody.
There's one event that happens here every year, the Big Spud competition. Now, this is island-wide and it's fierce competition. How did the entries go this year?
Well, it's getting more and more popular every year. We actually put 97 buckets out this year and seed potatoes.
Golly.
And I think there's about 88 come back. So it's done quite well to come back.
So this year, Gordon, Leslie Holsworth from Peel came up out top with his bucket of spuds. What was he close behind him?
Leslie had £18, 15 ounces. Dorothy Farragher was coming close behind second with £17 and Carol Farragher with £14. But these are all good weights. We're a lot lighter than last year. I mean, last year's weights were up around the 23.5, 21, £20, £22. That's the sort of range they were in. So it must have been a poor year all round.
So would it be, obviously they're grown in these tubs, so the ground conditions can't really affect them, but is it how they're kept at home or what they're feeding them maybe?
It's where they're fed, where they're kept, how much you water them. Some people I notice haven't put drain holes in the bottom of the tubs this year and they were waterlogged.
Oh, God.
And it's all little things you've got to remember. You don't think about it at the time. You just put the spud in and water and it can't get away. But all these things are took into consideration.
So will these spuds here today, will they be sold tonight? Because you obviously have a very successful sale of produce each year.
Yes, we do very good for our sale every year. Everybody that enters in the show are very good to leave their produce behind. We can hold the auction later. All proceeds, we pick a charity every year and try and keep it on the Isle of Man. And this year's charity is Motor Neuro in Isle of Man. Everything that's raised is not just from today, from the sports, from the ploughing matches. We hire out the marquees various times through the years and that's all put together.
Be very proud of yourselves. A lot of hard work goes into a day like today.
There is a lot of hard work go into it. And I know you're talking to me and you said I'm the chairman, but I'm only one person. The chairman is only at the head of a big committee. If it wasn't for the likes of Jim and Marion Kane and Dennis and Wendy Quirk and Ruth Brown and Mike, everybody that comes and does anything, it's all teamwork. There's no I in team, like you've just got to keep going and work together.
Finlow Sloan, you're a very keen gardener and you've won quite a number of prizes here tonight at the Crunkavoddy show. Do you enjoy gardening yourself?
Yeah,
And do you think you'll be a farmer or a gardener when you're older?
bit of both.
So what's next? You've got the sale of veggies this afternoon. Are you looking forward to the sale?
Yeah.
And what will you be buying?
Hope to buy one of the heavy pumpkins because seeds in the pumpkins. We're going to try planting the seeds.
Have you ever tried pumpkin growing before?
We were given a pumpkin seed, an Atlantic giant, but that didn't grow. It grew a little bit, like a centimetre, and then it just died off for some reason.
Oh, so try again harder next year then.
Yeah, hopefully. We'll try to get a polytunnel fields at Grandad's farm.
That's a good idea, isn't it?
Yeah, we've got like marrows and squashes growing down where we're hoping to build a polytunnel.
So you're a very keen gardener, and it's, your brothers and sisters, they help as well?
Yeah,
And is it a hard job to keep all these things going? What do you have to do to look after them?
make sure that the bugs aren't getting at them because
They'll ruin the leaves and stop them from growing as well, I suppose.
also carrot fly. We had a big problem with carrot flies this year, so the carrots were turning out very bad.
Oh no.
You need to keep weeding, make sure they've got plenty of water.
There was a continuous job then, all the way through the summer holidays to get them right for this show today.
Yeah, keeps you busy, stops you from being bored.
Very good. Well done, Finlow. Maddie, yourself and your family have done ever so well here at Crunkavoddy at the produce show. The children are so keen to take part. Is it something you've always enjoyed yourself?
Yeah, my gran got me gardening when I was little, and it's just something I was really keen to get the kids doing. They all like to muck in, especially digging the potatoes.
But then he's had competition. Finlow was saying that the big pumpkin, they're keen to have the pumpkin, to take the seeds to grow them. So there's obviously a lot of enthusiasm.
Yeah, it was a bit of a disappointment because he got some pumpkin seed this year, but they just didn't work out. So hopefully next year we'll get a massive pumpkin for them.
So do you make a lot of homegrown soups and dishes at home? Is it easier to grow your own produce to do that? Is it cheaper maybe?
I think it's just more satisfying for the kids because they've helped grow the vegetables themselves and then they're reaping the rewards at the end. So
the produce sale later this evening, that's obviously a big earner for. Does it all go back to the show at Cronkavody here?
Yeah, it all goes back to the show. I believe this year that's for motor neuron disease, which is a very worthwhile charity, so we're glad to support it.
That was Gordon Clegg, Jim Kane and Maddie and Finlow Sloan.
Always a great load of characters there, isn't it? And such bizarre competitions they have. The big spud, and you mentioned earlier, so many of them turned out from the 90 whatever buckets there was to start with. And there was a fair old winner.
Oh, yes. Leslie Holsall, he topped it again this year with 18.5 pounds of potatoes.
Really?
He's obviously got a few tricks up his sleeve.
Yeah, great that they've gotten the schools involved too, isn't it? And the youngsters with the turnips. There was a fair turnip there, wasn't there?
Oh, the enormous turnip. Yeah. It was a heck of a size. But it's lovely to see the schools taking part, and it keeps these competitions alive. And there was lots of new classes, decorated stones, something really simple like that. Animals made out of fruit and vegetables, nothing too serious, but able to take part.
Yeah, wonderful community.
Manx Radio's Countryside is brought to you by NFU Mutual.
And you've spoke to the beekeepers on the Isle of Man over recent times, Kiri, but what about heather honey? Do you know much about that?
I have heard it's very tasty, but I don't know much else about it.
No, well, I didn't really. But while I was at the Isle of Man Food and Drink Festival, I caught up with Ian Buxton, who's a member of the Alan Vannon Friendly Beekeepers Society, and he told me more about it.
It's a different kind of honey to most of the honey you'll buy in the shops. It's quite difficult to produce because it's a thixotropic honey. It sets like a jelly inside the honeycomb. So if you want to extract it and get it into a jar, it's a lot of hard work for the beekeeper. You've got to crush and press the honey out of the comb, or it could be cut out as a piece of honeycomb with the heather honey in it. It's different to extracting, not so easy to extract as a clear runny honey.
As a beekeeper, though, is that something that just makes it a little bit more of a challenge and sets you aside a little bit, that you can do it?
Yes, if you do that, it does make it a little bit more unique. It's more of a premium product, and there are only a couple of beekeepers on the Isle of Man that take the trouble to do it, because you've got to move the bees up to the heather and take them up on the hills so they can feed on that at the right time of year. And then when the flowers have gone, you've got to take the beehives back down from the mountain again, and then you've got all the hard work of extracting. So it is quite a difficult process. Yeah,
it's got a fairly dark look about it. You can dip the spoon in it really easily, like a liquid one. But when you turn the jar upside down, it stays in there.
Yes, a bit like a tomato ketchup has that sort of thixotropic consistency. It's solid or semi-solid, but when you hit it or agitate it in the right way, it will start to flow. So there are two ways to get it out of the honeycomb. You can either vibrate it and get it liquid and then try and extract it very quickly, but the usual method is to press it and then push it through filters and sieves. So it is quite difficult to get out, and a lot of beekeepers find that takes a lot more time than they've got available to them to do it.
Yeah. for the diehards.
And it's for the experts, really, I suppose. But it's an interesting honey because it's being compared to the Manuka honeys that New Zealand produces. It's a similar kind of shrub, and it has a slightly, possibly a medicinal taste to it, a little bit different to the sweeter blossom honeys. And there is some studies that say that the heather honeys and some of the honeys in Scotland, which will also probably be on the heather and other shrubs, actually have more active ingredients in them than some of the Manuka honeys that are on sale. So I think it will become a lucrative crop and a specialist crop for the Isle of Man and for the northern counties of the UK to be able to produce heather honey in the future.
And it's a funny scenario, that, because you think if they were in a normal environment with loads of different types of flowers to get the nectar from, whereas the heather, they'd be sort of limited to certain type.
Yeah. Sometimes you get a mixture, so you get the bees that are on the edge of where the heather's growing. You'll get blossom earlier in the season, and then the heather, when it comes into flower, they'll take that. But to produce pure heather honey, you've got to wait for the season of the heather and then actually move your bees up to the hills. It's an interesting sort of job to do. I've not tried that yet, but I'll be looking at it in the future.
The Manx honey it's still preferred by a lot of people, isn't it?
It is, and local honey, if you eat your local honey from your nearest beekeepers, it's supposed to have beneficial health properties for you, especially if you have allergies like hay fever. You're consuming a little bit of the local pollens that are around in the area. So you're building up a little bit of immunity as a theory.
How long have you been involved in it now?
I've been keeping bees for the last 3 years, and Pat and Karen Shimmin are my beekeeping mentors. They've been helping me with how to learn the craft, how to work with the hive. We're maybe a little bit different to some traditional beekeepers because we don't use smoke when we go into our hives. We only open them without smoke, or sometimes use a little spray of water. The traditional way that the old beekeepers use is to use smoke, but the reason I don't do that is it promotes a little bit of a fear response in the bees. They go down into the hive and they consume the honey because they think they're going to have to take flight and find a new home. They think fire is coming. So I don't like that idea, so I subscribe to a non-smoked beehive.
Yeah, so you're a bit more daredevil then, not sedating them a bit.
Well,
you'd be going in naked without a suit on next.
I have tried beekeeping without gloves. Some beekeepers do that quite a lot. If you're gentle with the bees and careful, it can go well, but if you get it wrong, and as a learner you're often going to get it wrong, you could get stung. Generally a little bit painful for a couple of days, but it's not too bad.
They're misunderstood though, aren't they?
Bees are very misunderstood. Wasps are also misunderstood. Everybody thinks wasps are bad, but actually wasps are very good for the environment as well. Not many people know this, but wasps are carnivores, so they'll eat all of the bugs and things like the aphids that we don't really want in our gardens. They'll eat those and consume them and feed them to their grubs. And then they take a little drop of honeydew from the grub, and that's what the adult wasp lives on. So when all those grubs have grown up and become wasps, suddenly the food source for the wasps disappears. And that's why you see them joining our picnics and trying to get our sweet drinks, because they're starving at the end of the season, the end of the summer.
Wow, it's fascinating.
So everything has its place. Yeah. The environment's important, and we should look after the bees and the wasps, really.
That was Ian Buxton from the Ellen Vannon Friendly Beekeepers Society telling me more about heather honey, which has got a lot of potential, Kiri, hasn't it, with that comparison with the Manuka honey properties as well that they're thinking.
Lots of health benefits come from natural products, and if this is the case, then it's absolutely brilliant for the beekeepers on the Isle of Man.
Yeah, but just be aware, it's a lot to beekeeping, so it's not just for every Tom, Dick and Harry. I think you've got to know a little bit about it, so if you're thinking of going into it, talk to the people who know. You've been up north as well. What were you doing there around Smale?
I caught up with Alan and Sandra Jones to talk about livestock farming in the north of the island, and also their diversification into a very successful Croitney Bain B&B.
We've only just gone into the Simmentals. We had the chance of some really good breeding cows in England. We were away at a bull sale. We'd taken some of our pedigree heifers away to sell, and we had the chance of buying these couple of good Simmental cows that were in calf. So we'd always liked the Simmental as well as the British Blue, so we decided, yes, why not? We'll start another lot as well.
But to choose the genetics, I imagine you have to go to the UK to get the best of bloodlines to cross with your homebred cows.
Yes, we do a lot of artificial insemination on the pedigree cows.
Yeah.
So we're trying to get the best bloodlines that we can afford. I'm paying a lot of money for some of the straws, but you're just trying to get the best that you can.
Tonight here we've seen some of the offspring for this year, some lovely British Blue bull calves. What will you do with them?
Depending on the demand on the island, we'll hopefully sell some of them on the island, and then if we've got any that we haven't had demand for, we will take those to a pedigree sale away, because in England the people there that are buying stock really, really like the health status of the Isle of Man. This is what people like about the Isle of Man stock.
And you also keep sheep. Do you show the pedigree sheep too?
No, we don't. We have pure Romneys and we have pure Beltexes. And the Beltexes, we're selling the tups and tup lambs and the females. With the Romneys, it's more about we're selling the females for replacement ewes for people. So we have a customer that buys those off us every year. So the male Romneys, they go into the fat stock. So that's meat for the island, for the lambs. But no, we can't do everything, and we're both cattle people really, more so than sheep.
I can imagine at lambing time or calving time, it will be a very busy place.
Yes, it is. We lamb and calve at the same time. They're in sheds next door to each other. Yeah. You just have to get used to not getting to bed sometimes.
How do you manage with the pedigree cattle in particular? You see that they have a bit of a fashion or a trend or the latest outlook. A beast you might prefer white ones this year or black and white ones the year after, or one that's got, you know, a bright outlook, a cocky head or a sparkle about them, or really great locomotion or less muscular. How do you manage to keep up, especially being away from the UK, with these trends?
Well, we belong to the British Blue Society, so we've got all of that, of course, on the computer, and we're watching to see what's going on. The darker bulls are the more popular at the moment, white bulls for the dairy industry, but the darker ones for the beef industry. The white ones because they throw a pale blue calf, which is what the dairy people want. Beef people prefer the darker bulls.
And you've got a busy month or two coming up ahead of you with the annual suckler sale you have here at St John's.
Yes, well, we're just starting to feed the calves a bit now, just to get them eating well for people before they buy them.
You have a good sale most years. Will you have repeat buyers mostly?
Usually, yes.
The cattle do well for them, so they come back time and time again. So we sell our calves on, and those become meat animals eventually, and hopefully most of that will go through the fat stock, which is very important. We want to keep, you know, good quality produce on the island here.
But also you have an award-winning bed and breakfast that certainly keeps you on your toes at maybe the weekends in particular.
Yeah, just a bit. That's an important part of our business. It's important for the income, but it's also important to be meeting people. And we meet people from all over the world, and it's a really nice way of earning a bit extra and bringing in extra income to the farm. I belong to the Isle of Man Stay on a Farm group, and we're a small working group of farms. Our ethos is, if you like, that we are all working farms, and that's what people enjoy coming for, because they want to see what goes on a working farm. We offer them tours so they can go round in the Land Rover and up in the middle of the cows and seeing the calves and just being careful, but they enjoy it. People don't realise what goes on day to day on a farm, and they just love it. And Alan usually comes in when I've finished breakfast and says good morning to them all, and they're asking him what he's going to be doing today, and, you know, things like that. And especially if there's a cow due to calve. Has she calved yet? First question when you come in. The people that come here are the people that want to be out in the countryside. They don't want to be in the towns. Yeah. They're not bothered. They're back here maybe 7 or 8 o'clock at night, and they're sitting in the conservatory, and there's cows and calves in the field next to them, and they're watching them, and you see them running for their camera, and they're out the door and photographs taken.
That was Alan and Sandra Jones from Courtney Bain in Smale. Yeah,
and it's also great that there's awards exist, you know, that I hear that they get as well for, you know, using a lot of Manx produce in their bed and breakfast facilities. You know, it's just great, and these things you don't know about, isn't it?
This is it. A lot of work goes into the B&B side of it, and there's many awards that can be achieved. And the Harvest Award for the using of the Manx produce, I think, is essential for people visiting our island. And Alan and Sandra use all Manx produce in that B&B business, and I think it's wonderful.
Manx Radio's Countryside is brought to you by NFU Mutual.
Well, from little tiny busy bees to massive 100 kg pumpkins, a bit of contrast in it. All interesting though, isn't it? Particularly the heather honey as well. Ian Buxton there telling us quite a bit about that, and that connection that they're hoping with the Manuka honey. I think it's New Zealand, a lot of it's produced as well, so such medicinal benefits from it that people... And it's one of them things, the old wives' tales, isn't it? I get some honey in you, that'll cure your throat.
And it still works.
Yeah, it does. So we'll leave it there for this week's Countryside. We'll be back the same time next week. So from me, Simon Clark.
And me, Kerry Kermode.
We'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Don't sit in the slow lane. Join the fast lane right now with Shaw's all-new Superfast Plus broadband. Enjoy more bandwidth, amazing speeds and the best value on the island from just £23.95 per month. So don't be left behind. Get a piece of the high-speed action with Superfast Plus broadband from Shaw. For details, visit our stores in Douglas, Ramsey and Port Erin or click shaw.com. Love being Shaw. Terms and conditions apply.